So at the end of the last video, I asked you to think about the players involved in the delivery of health care, the individuals and the organizations. I'm sure you came up with doctors, nurses, hospitals, but then there's more. There are the insurance companies, the ancillary services like X-ray, labs, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy. There are nursing homes and assisted living facilities, memory care facilities, hospice facilities, pharmaceutical companies, HMOs, health management organizations, and there are a multitude. Probably though, the two that you might not have come up with, and you probably would have if you'd spent a little bit more time, but number one, the patient. We tend to, when we start listing that, we forget the patient themselves. And then you have the government and many different agencies within the government determine the types of health care that we are able to get, those that we are approved for. So there is a governmental component. Even though we are not in a system of socialized medicine like many European countries, there's still a large part that the government plays in the delivery of health care. So healthcare law is very, very case driven. It's common law grounded. It is instead of dealing a lot with statutes, we are going to be talking about relationships. Now there will be some statutes, but we're really talking about the relationships that exist between those actors that we just named out. Relationships are really the only common thread in healthcare law. These relationships are, the patient-physician relationship, which encompasses the duty to treat, confidentiality, informed consent, malpractice. Those are all things we will talk about. Then there's the state oversight of doctors and patients, which encompasses the right to die, reproductive rights, physician licensure, and public health. Then you are dealing with the institutions that surround treatments or the treatment relationship, which encompasses public and private insurance, hospitals, both those for-profit and not-for-profit, HMOs, and more complex transactions and organizational forms. Health care law is about the delivery of an extremely important, very expensive, and highly specialized professional service. Most of us come to healthcare law or come to the idea of healthcare law with a lot of preconceived notions about these relationships and the duties that these actors owe one another. We are going to learn that sometimes an individual's legal duty and his or her moral duty are not always the same. And also realize that the topics that we are going to talk about are going to challenge your current view of healthcare and the actors we will encounter. So what are some of these misconceptions about health care? Well, one is that the doctor should be able to know what conditions the patient has, to answer the patient's questions precisely, and to prescribe the right treatment. If the doctor doesn't, that is incompetence or even malpractice. Okay, so that's the first one. The second, that for each medical condition there is a best treatment. It's up to the doctor to know about that treatment and to use it. Anything else is unnecessary surgery, waste, fraud, or underservice. So that's the second preconception. The third is that medicine is an exact science. Unlike 50 or 100 years ago, there's now a firm scientific base for what the doctor does. Standard treatments are supported by scientific proof of efficiency. Okay, that's the third. The fourth misconception is that medical care consists of standard products that can be described precisely and measured meaningfully in standard units, such as inpatient days, outpatient visits, or doctor office visits. Okay? The fifth misconception is that much of medical care is a matter of life and death, or serious pain or disability. 6, that more medical care is better than less care. And then the 7th misconception is that people have no control over the timing of their need for medical care. Whatever care is needed right away. So these misconceptions, and I really think you're going to see that they are misconceptions, grow out of our present view of our modern healthcare system. But up until the turn of the 20th century, upon entering a hospital, your chances of obtaining medical care that helped you rather than hurt you were only about 50%. Hospitals were the place where the indigent went to die. This is a concept that seems completely unimaginable to us now. Hence, our previously mentioned misconceptions. Attitudes about sickness and disability have undergone great changes. Primitive societies ostracized the sick. The ancient Greeks attached a stigma of unworthiness to a sick person. An incurable disease was held to be a sufficient reason for suicide. With Christianity came a sharp change. Illness was held to be a grace, the cross which the sick man carries following the footsteps of Christ. The care of the ill became a primary concern of the church, and the position of the sick was gradually raised to the protected status it now has in Western civilizations. Attitudes toward medical care, it has shifted over the centuries. Once a blessed benevolence or a private luxury, medical care has gradually assumed the status of a necessity and a right. The speed and the degree of the most recent change has been so great that we may be said to be living in a veritable revolution of rising expectations in regard to health and medical care. For example, take this this story. Charles II of England. Okay, this dates back to 1685.